She was just another passenger waiting for a flight at a crowded airport. Well-dressed and calm, she stood out, but to two airport police officers and a wealthy white passenger, her presence as a successful black woman was an eyesore. She was stopped for no reason, subjected to biased questions about her business, class ticket, and her finances questions no white passenger would ever face when she protested, demanding basic respect. And civil rights chaos erupted. She was bombarded with cruel insults and racial slurs that echoed through the stunned crowd. The officers shouted at her, threatened her, and then did the unthinkable, handcuffed her in front of hundreds of people. She was treated like a criminal, publicly humiliated, all because of someone else's ignorance and hatred. But these two officers made a huge mistake. They had no idea who she really was, a mistake that would cost them dearly, because this woman was not an ordinary passenger. She held one of the most powerful roles in the American legal system. What would happen once the truth came out at the airport station? How would the two officers react when they realized who they had just attacked? Would their desperate apologies change anything, and what consequences would they and the woman who provoked them face? Before we continue, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us. Thank you so much. The international airport on a Friday afternoon was a symphony of controlled chaos. Loudspeakers called out flight announcements in crisp English, mingling with the buzz of multiple languages. Rolling suitcases clattered across marble floors. There were voices, laughter, phone calls, crying children. The air was filled with the scent of coffee, perfume, fast food, and the chill of recycled air. Electronic boards constantly updated departure and arrival times in flashing green and red letters. At Gate B10, where Atlantic Airlines Flight 744 was preparing to depart for Chicago, a group of passengers gathered, some seated, some standing, some scrolling on their phones or reading, all a little impatient. Among them was Rennie Cole, standing near the front of the priority line. Around 50 years old, she looked serious, intelligent, and slightly fatigued after completing a 3-day legal conference. She wore straight-leg black trousers and a light vest. Or low heels were comfortable yet elegant, perfect for a long flight. No flashy jewelry, just a sleek watch and a quality dark leather handbag beside her small suitcase. She was traveling alone, without any assistant or security detail, simply hoping for a peaceful weekend. As she waited, she browsed documents on her tablet. Not far behind her stood Mrs. Beatrice Hale, a white woman in her 60s, dressed in designer clothes with diamond jewelry sparkling around her neck and wrists. Her expression was sour, her gaze judgmental. She checked her watch, constantly sighing loudly. Her eyes landed on Cole and lingered with visible displeasure in Hale. Narrow, prejudiced view. A black woman had no place in a business class line. She muttered comments about crazy times and how anyone can get priority now, loud enough for others to hear. Then she marched to the gate agent's desk, her tone arrogant and flirtatious. "Hey, you, why do I have to wait with those people?" she said, gesturing toward Cole. "Look at her, she's suspicious. She's been eyeing my luggage. I don't feel safe flying with people like that. They probably use fake documents to get into business class. You should check." The young gate agent was caught off guard, trying to explain that Cole was a verified passenger, but Hale wouldn't stop, continuing to escalate the situation. Her loud complaints caught the attention of two nearby airport officers, Hank Delaney, an older seasoned officer with a sharp eye, and Sean Maddox, younger and more aggressive. Hale immediately seized the opportunity. Her tone shifted to one of pleading, but still full of malice. "Oh, officers, thank goodness you're here," she said dramatically. "That black woman," she pointed to Cole, who was standing silently watching, "she looks dangerous. She kept staring at me, at my bag. She's staring at me strangely. I'm really scared to be near her on the plane. Please check her thoroughly. We can't let Bad elements on board with skillful. Manipulation, she stirred fear and suspicion using racial prejudice to serve her own selfish aims. Officer Delaney, influenced by his own bias, quickly believed the well-dressed white woman. He looked at Cole with suspicion. Officer Maddox, younger and more aggressive, joined in his expression, turning hostile to them. This was an easy chance to assert power by targeting the accused, no matter how baseless the accusation. The two officers walked straight toward Cole, their movement stiff and deliberate, creating tension. Passengers in the line parted slowly, watching with a mix of curiosity and unease. Ma'am, Delaney said first, his voice trying to sound neutral, but still heavy with authority. Please step out of the line. We need to speak with you. Privately, though surprised, Cole stayed composed. She looked calmly at the officers and briefly glanced at Mrs. Hale, who now stood with her arms folded. In a smug, triumphant smile, Cole knew exactly what was happening. Without a word, she stepped aside. What is this about, officers? She asked, her voice steady. We've received a complaint from another passenger, Delaney said flatly. They claim you're acting suspiciously and may pose a security risk. We need to check your ID and boarding pass. Cole calmly opened her bag, retrieved her driver's license and business class boarding pass, and handed them to Delaney. These are my documents. They're perfectly valid, she said. Now tell me, what suspicious behavior am I being accused of, and who made the complaint? I was simply standing there like everyone else. Maddox interrupted impatiently. Why so many questions? Just follow orders. Your attitude alone is suspicious. Delaney glanced at her documents and then back at her, his eyes lingering on her formal clothes and luxury bag. Renee Cole, he read business class. He smirked. How did someone like you? He didn't finish. The meaning was clear. What do you do for a living? Are you sure this is your ticket? The insult hit hard. Cole felt her face flush, but kept her tone controlled. You're accusing me based on personal prejudice and someone else's slander, not evidence. My ticket, class, and my profession are none of your business as long as I'm following the law. She looked both officers in the eye. Her voice grew firmer. I am a U.S. citizen and a lawful passenger. I have the right to be treated with respect and without discrimination. Your words, your tone, and your attitude violate my civil rights and the police code of conduct. She extended her hand. Now I'm asking you to return my documents, and I want your names and badge numbers. Are strong and fearless words shook both officers. They were used to people, especially people of color, fearing them. This boldness infuriated them. What, you dare to talk back? Maddox yelled, stepping closer, face red with rage. Who do you think you are? We are the law. You think you can defy us? Delaney S. face twisted in anger. You arrogant black woman, who do you think you're talking to? Playing the smart lawyer again. We can do whatever it takes to protect this airport. You want to get on this flight or go to jail? Their voices rose and racial slurs spilled out loudly in front of everyone. Passengers looked on, stunned and disturbed. No one dared step in. The gate agent tried, but Delaney dismissed him. Mrs. Hale stood to the side, arms crossed, her satisfied smile showing. She'd gotten what she wanted to humiliate the black woman she despised, though her heart ached with fury and pain. Cole held her head high. She took a deep breath. Your actions have crossed the line. You will be held fully accountable. I'll make sure of it. Delaney sneered. Let's see who pays the price. He raised his voice. Arrest this woman. Charges disturbing public order, refusing to comply with police, and threatening airport safety. The charges were all lies, but the officers were determined to arrest a woman who dared to stand up to them. As soon as Officer Delaney gave the absurd arrest order, Officer Maddox lunged forward and grabbed Cole's arm. Aggressively, she flinched but didn't resist, knowing that any physical reaction would only escalate things. You have no right to do this. Let go of my hand, she protested, her voice cutting clearly through the tense silence of the watching crowd. But Maddox ignored her. He twisted her arms behind her back, and yanked out his handcuffs, the cold metal, snapped around her wrist, digging into her skin with pain and humiliation. The entire scene unfolded in full view of everyone at Gate B10 Cole, handcuffed and humiliated, all because of her skin color and a baseless complaint. Delaney stood nearby, arms crossed. Clearly satisfied, he muttered insults. Under his breath, not far away, Mrs. Hale stood watching with a smug, victorious smile. She had succeeded in removing the intruder. Move! Maddox barked, shoving Cole forward. They didn't lead her toward the gate, but instead toward airport security and the police station. It was a walk of shame. Cole, wristbound, held her back straight and walked with as much dignity as she could. She felt the eyes of the crowd, some filled with pity, some fear, and some with silent agreement, but she kept her gaze steady, already memorizing every face in detail. Through the crowded terminal they went, the noise amplifying the humiliation. Finally, they arrived at the airport police station, a small, nondescript office tucked in a quiet corner. Inside, they pushed Cole into the processing room where a duty officer sat. Behind a metal desk, Delaney and Maddox gave an exaggerated version of events, painting Cole as a dangerous, uncooperative passenger. They handed over her ID. The officer began inputting her information, seemingly unfazed by airport chaos. Cole remained calm, answering his questions clearly. Then came the routine question, "What is your occupation?" Delaney and Maddox watched smugly, arms crossed, expecting a routine response. Cole took a breath, lifted her chin, and looked the officer directly in the eye. Her cold gaze and swept Delaney and Maddox, who had no idea what was about to hit them. Her voice was steady, composed, and carried undeniable authority. "I am Chief Judge Renique Cole of the Federal Court of Appeals." The room fell silent. The pen dropped from the duty officer's hand. His eyes widened in shock. A federal appeals court judge, one of the most powerful legal roles in the country, stood before him. Handcuffed, Delaney and Maddox, smug expressions vanished. Their faces went pale, their bodies froze, their eyes locked on Cole in horror, realizing too late what they had done. They hadn't just insulted and arrested a random woman, they had humiliated a federal judge, a woman who could bring their entire careers to an end with a single ruling. Delaney stumbled back, hitting the wall. Maddox stood shaking, breath shallow and panicked. When the shock wore off, they scrambled to beg for mercy. Chief Judge Cole, Delaney stammered, voice trembling, "We didn't know. We're sorry. This was a misunderstanding, an awful mistake." Maddox dropped to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. "Please, Judge, forgive us. We were just following a complaint. Please don't ruin our lives. We have families, children there." Desperate, pitiful apologies filled the room, but they couldn't undo the humiliation and abuse Cole had endured. Just minutes before, Judge Renee Cole stood tall, composed, and unshaken. She didn't flinch. She didn't offer sympathy. She had seen too many empty apologies in court to be moved by tears. Now she turned to the duty officer, who stood there stunned. Her voice was calm, yet carried undeniable authority. "Officer, I request you to remove these handcuffs immediately." Startled, the officer fumbled for the key and with trembling hands unlocked the tight metal cuffs binding the judge's wrists. Red marks were clearly visible on her skin. Judge Cole continued as she rubbed her wrist, "Call your airport police chief right now. Tell him I'm here and ask him to come immediately. Also contact the U.S. Marshal's office in this area and the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Court of Appeals. Report everything I want their representatives here as soon as possible." Her voice no longer sounded like that of a detained passenger, but that of a judicial authority issuing clear and direct orders. The officer didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone and made the calls, his voice still shaky with shock and fear. The news that the chief judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals had been wrongfully detained and insulted by two airport police officers sent shock waves through airport management and federal law enforcement. Within 30 minutes, the airport police chief arrived accompanied by deputy chiefs and senior security officials. All looked pale, visibly tense and anxious. Shortly after, agents from the U.S. Marshal Service, the federal agency tasked with protecting judges and courts, arrived as well, along with the marshal himself and senior staff members from the Court of Appeals. The small airport police station suddenly became the epicenter of a major crisis. The airport police chief approached Judge Cole, immediately bowed his head, and issued a deep formal apology for his officers' unacceptable behavior. He promised a full investigation and disciplinary action. An emergency meeting was held on site. Judge Cole, supported by the chief clerk of the court, gave a detailed and objective account of everything from Mrs. Hale as provocation to the biased actions of officers Delaney and Maddox, the offensive remarks, and her public handcuffing. After her testimony, the airport police chief had nothing left to defend. He acted at once. Officers Hank Delaney and Luke Maddox were suspended indefinitely. They were stripped of their weapons, badges, and all police equipment. The airport's Internal Affairs Division was ordered to work with the FBI to launch a full criminal investigation. He also issued an order to secure all relevant evidence, security footage from Gate B10 body camera, recordings from the officers, and written statements from airline and airport personnel who witnessed the incident. Top priority was given to identifying and locating Mrs. Beatrice Hale. Investigators confirmed her name and flight. If she hadn't yet departed, she would be detained immediately. If she had already boarded, the destination authorities would be notified to question her about making false statements and inciting discriminatory action. Hale was warned that she could face serious criminal charges, including filing false claims with law enforcement. Faced with video evidence and testimony, including from 2 officers hoping to reduce their own punishment, Hale quickly dropped her arrogance. Now scared, she weakly denied the accusations, although the first steps toward justice had been taken. The real process had only begun. The joint investigation by Airport Internal Affairs and the FBI Civil Rights Division moved swiftly. The evidence against officers Delaney and Maddox was overwhelming and undeniable. Surveillance footage from the gate body camera recordings and consistent witness statements, including that of Judge Cole, clearly showed a pattern of abuse of power, racial profiling, and unlawful detention. Mrs. Beatrice Hale's role in inciting the incident and providing racially biased claims was also confirmed to be a key factor in escalating the situation. Once the investigation concluded and the charges were clear, the consequences for the officers came quickly. Due to the seriousness and inexcusable nature of the offense, the airport police chief made the final decision to permanently dismiss Officer Hank Delaney and Officer Luke Maddox from the force, but losing their jobs was only the beginning, because this case involved serious civil rights violations and the unlawful treatment of a high-ranking federal judge. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed federal criminal charges against both men. They were charged with violating civil rights under color of law, unlawful detention, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Their trial in federal court drew nationwide attention. The prosecution presented a compelling case supported by video footage, eyewitness accounts, and the powerful direct testimony of Judge Cole. The defense struggled to counter the evidence. In the end, the jury found both Delaney and Maddox guilty. The federal judge overseeing the case delivered strong sentencing remarks, stressing the danger of racial bias in law enforcement, the betrayal of public trust, and the need to set a clear example given the seriousness of unlawfully detaining and assaulting a federal judge. Each officer was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Some might argue the sentence was harsh, but under the law it sent a clear message. Abuse of power would not be tolerated. As for Beatrice Hale, her actions also carried consequences, facing potential prosecution for making false statements. To federal authorities, a charge that could carry prison time and the possibility of a civil lawsuit from. Judge Cole, her attorney, quickly negotiated a deal to avoid a public trial and greater humiliation. Hale agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge and pay a heavy fine up to $450,000. It was a steep, fitting penalty for her malicious, racist behavior. The story ended with justice served in different forms for each wrongdoer. It became a hard but important lesson for police about the need for fairness, accountability, and respect, and a reminder to society about the lasting harm caused by bias and hate. Despite the humiliating ordeal, Chief Judge Renee Cole returned to her role with unshaken strength. The experience didn't weaken her, it only deepened her resolve to fight for a fair, equal system of justice that leaves no room for racism or abuse of power. She understood that the fight would be long, but she was never going to back down. This story forces us to reflect on the dangers of prejudice and the abuse of power, no matter how high your position or how much authority you hold. If society remains silent, racism can reach anyone. If I were the main character, I wouldn't stop at justice for myself. I would keep fighting to protect those who have no voice. Will racism end by 2040? Maybe not yet, but if we keep speaking out and taking action today, that day may come sooner than we think. Note this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised. English auto-generated.